I stood at the kitchen counter, watching Liam fold the same way he'd folded laundry for 8 years. Precise corners, no wrinkles. The routine had calcified around us like old concrete. "Coffee?" I asked, though I already knew his answer. "Half cream, 1 sugar." He didn't look up from his shirts. I poured 2 cups, added his cream, stirred clockwise. Even my rebellion had become predictable. The keycard from last week's hotel conference sat on the counter between us, forgotten. I'd meant to return it. "Veronica." His voice carried something different today. "I want to show you something." I turned, studying his face. After 8 years, I could read his expressions like weather patterns. This wasn't his work voice or his weekend voice. This was uncharted territory. Show me what? A place where time stops. The coffee cup grew warm in my hands. "Liam, what are you talking about?" He set down the shirt he'd been folding, walked over to me. His hands found my shoulders, fingers pressing gently into the tension I carried there. "Trust me," he said. "Tonight, after dinner. Just trust me." I searched his eyes for the script, the familiar pattern that would tell me what came next. Found nothing but a question mark I'd never seen before. "Okay," I heard myself say. The keycard caught the morning light, plastic gleaming like a small promise I couldn't yet understand. The shopping center parking lot stretched empty beneath sodium lights. Liam parked near the edge where the city spread below us like scattered jewels. I'd driven past this place 1,000 times, never thinking of it as anything but utilitarian concrete. "Here?" I asked. He turned off the engine, but left the radio playing softly. "Sometimes you have to look at familiar things from a different angle. It's beautiful up here," I admitted. The city looked smaller from this height, more manageable, like I could hold it all in my cupped hands. Liam unbuckled his seatbelt. "Wait here." "Where are you going?" "I'll be right back." He kissed my forehead, a gesture so tender it caught me off guard. "Don't move." The car door closed with a soft click. I watched him walk toward the stairwell, his silhouette disappearing into shadows. The radio played something instrumental, violins and piano weaving together in a melody I didn't recognize but found myself humming along to. I rolled down the window, let the night air touch my face. The city breathed differently up here, quieter, more honest somehow. The neon sign continued its patient blinking. On, off, on, off. I checked the clock on the dashboard. 3 minutes had passed. Then footsteps approached from the opposite direction. A figure emerged from between 2 parked cars. Male, younger than Liam by maybe 10 years. Dark hoodie pulled up, but I caught glimpses of his face in the flickering light. Strong jaw, confident stride. He moved like someone who belonged in shadows. He approached the passenger side, tapped gently on the window. I hesitated, then rolled it down halfway. "Veronica?" His voice was softer than I expected. "Yes." "He said you wouldn't mind." He opened the door without waiting for permission, slid into the seat Liam had vacated. The car suddenly felt smaller, the air charged with something I couldn't name. "He said what exactly?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. The stranger turned to face me. Up close, I could see his eyes were dark brown, almost black in this light. "That you were looking for something different, something real." His hand moved to rest on my thigh. Not aggressive, not demanding. Just there, warm through the fabric of my jeans. I should have pulled away, should have demanded explanations, should have gotten out of the car and called for Liam. Instead, I found myself studying the contrast between his fingers and mine when I placed my hand over his. "What's your name?" I asked. "Does it matter?" The radio continued playing, violins building to something that sounded like inevitability. The city lights blurred slightly as my focus narrowed to the space between us, the warmth radiating from where our hands touched. "No," I whispered. "I suppose it doesn't." He smiled then, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him. "He was right about you." "What else did he tell you?" "That you were ready to stop pretending." The music from the radio wrapped around us like a cocoon. He leaned closer, and I breathed in the scent of him. Something clean and unfamiliar. Nothing like Liam's cologne or aftershave. This was uncharted territory, and every nerve in my body hummed with the recognition of crossing a line. "Are you sure?" he asked, his breath warm against my ear. I thought of 8 years of folded shirts and predictable coffee orders. 8 years of conversations that never surprised me, touches that had become automatic. 8 years of feeling like I was sleepwalking through my own life. "Yes," I said, and meant it. What happened next belonged to the darkness and the music and the open sky above us. His hands found my face, my neck, the curve of my waist. I discovered muscles I'd forgotten I had, responses I'd thought had died from disuse. The car windows fogged despite the cool night air. The city kept its distance, respectfully indifferent to our transformation. The radio played on, violins soaring into something that sounded like freedom. I lost track of time, of consequences, of everything except the electric current running between us. When it was over, we sat in the quiet aftermath, both of us breathing hard. The music had shifted to something softer, more contemplative. I touched my lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss there. "Thank you," I said, surprised by my own honesty. He smiled, reached for the door handle. "Thank you." "Wait." I caught his wrist. "Will I see you again?" He studied my face in the dim light. "Do you want to?" The question hung between us like a bridge I could choose to cross or burn. "I don't know," I admitted. He nodded, as if this was the answer he'd expected. "That's honest." The door opened, and he stepped back into the night. I watched him walk away, hands in his pockets, unhurried. He disappeared between the same cars he'd emerged from, as if he'd never existed at all. I sat alone with the radio and my racing heartbeat. The passenger seat still held the impression of his body, the lingering warmth of what we'd shared. I touched my hair, smoothed my clothes, tried to piece myself back into the shape Liam would recognize. But something fundamental had shifted. I could feel it in the way I held my shoulders, the steadiness of my breathing. The woman who'd waited in this car 20 minutes ago felt like a stranger now. Footsteps approached from the stairwell. Liam's familiar gait, measured and deliberate. I watched him walk toward the car, his face unreadable in the sodium light. He opened the driver's door, slid behind the wheel. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The radio filled the silence with soft jazz, the same station that had soundtracked everything that had just changed between us. "So," he said finally, turning the key in the ignition. The engine hummed to life. "Did time stop?" I looked at him, really looked. His profile in the dashboard light revealed nothing. No jealousy, no anger, no hurt, just curiosity, as if he'd asked about the weather. "For the first time in a long time," I said slowly. "Yes." He nodded, put the car in reverse. "Good." We drove in silence through empty streets. I watched familiar landmarks slide past the windows. The grocery store where we shopped every Saturday, the park where we'd had our first date, the intersection where we'd bought our house. Everything looked the same, but I felt like I was seeing it through different eyes. "Liam," I said as we turned onto our street. "Yeah?" "Why?" He pulled into our driveway, turned off the engine. In the sudden quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat again. "Because I love you," he said simply. "And I wanted to give you something I couldn't." Inside the house, I poured myself a glass of wine. My hands shook slightly as I twisted the cork. Liam sat at the kitchen table, watching me with the same patient attention he'd given his morning shirts. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. "Months." He accepted the glass I offered him. "Maybe longer." "And him? How did you—" I couldn't finish the question. "Online. There are places for arrangements like this. People who understand that sometimes love means letting go." I pulled the hotel keycard from my purse, set it on the table between us. It looked different now, less like forgotten plastic and more like evidence of something I couldn't name. "The conference last week," I said. "You knew I kept this." "I hoped you would." He reached across the table, covered my hand with his. "Because you used to steal hotel soap. Little rebellions. You haven't done anything spontaneous in 2 years. The wine tasted sharp on my tongue. "So, you arranged for me to sleep with a stranger." "I arranged for you to feel alive again." His thumb traced circles on my wrist. "There's a difference." "And what about you? What do you get out of this?" For the first time all evening, his composure cracked slightly. "I get to keep you." The words hung in the air like a confession. I understood then what I'd been too blind to see before. This wasn't about his fantasy or some twisted game. This was about us, about the slow death of passion that neither of us had been brave enough to acknowledge. "You think I was going to leave you?" I said. "I think we were both going to disappear." I looked at the keycard again, remembering the weight of the stranger's hand on my thigh, the electricity of being wanted by someone who didn't know my coffee order or my favorite TV shows. "And now?" Liam lifted his wine glass, studied the ruby liquid in the kitchen light. "Now we know what we're capable of." I woke before dawn, slipped out of bed while Liam still slept. The kitchen felt different in the gray morning light, as if the walls themselves had absorbed what happened between us the night before. I made coffee, stood at the window watching the sun paint the sky in soft pastels. The diner across town would be switching off its neon sign about now, preparing for the breakfast rush. I wondered if the stranger was an early riser, if he drank coffee black or with cream. "Couldn't sleep?" Liam appeared in the doorway, hair tousled, wearing the same t-shirt he'd slept in for 3 years. "Just thinking." He joined me at the window, accepted the cup I handed him. "Regrets?" I considered the question seriously. "No. You?" "None." We stood side by side, watching our neighborhood wake up. Mrs. Chen walking her terrier, the teenager from 2 houses down leaving for his morning run, the familiar choreography of suburban life continuing as if nothing had changed, but everything had changed. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know." He turned to face me. "What do you want to happen?" The question was bigger than it sounded. I could hear all the other questions nested inside it. Do we pretend this never happened? Do we do it again? Do we talk about it over dinner parties with friends? Do we finally have the conversation we've been avoiding for 2 years? "I want to not know," I said finally. "For the first time in 8 years, I want to not have a plan." He smiled, the expression transforming his familiar features into something I almost didn't recognize. "I can live with that." The neon sign's absence felt strange, even from this distance, like losing a lighthouse you didn't know you'd been navigating by. "Liam, thank you." He kissed my temple, tasted like coffee and possibility. "Thank you for trusting me." Outside, the world continued its predictable rotation. Inside, we began the careful work of learning how to be strangers to ourselves. 3 days later, I found myself driving past the shopping center on my way home from work. The parking lot looked ordinary in daylight, just concrete and painted lines, no trace of the magic that had transformed it into sacred space. I parked in the same spot, rolled down the windows, and sat in the afternoon quiet. My phone buzzed. A text from Liam. "Working late tonight. Order whatever you want for dinner." 6 months ago, this message would have felt like abandonment. Tonight, it felt like permission. I scrolled through my contacts, stopped at a number I'd never dialed. He'd given it to me before he left the car that night, just in case. I'd entered it without thinking. Muscle memory from a self I was still learning to be. My finger hovered over the call button. The choice felt enormous, weighted with implications I couldn't fully map. Call him, and we'd be people who did this. Don't call, and that night would remain a beautiful anomaly, perfect in its singularity. I thought about Liam folding shirts this morning, the same precise movements, but somehow looser, less rigid. I thought about the way he'd looked at me over coffee, like he was seeing me for the first time in years. I thought about the stranger's hands, the way he'd made me feel like electricity instead of furniture. I made my choice. The phone rang twice before he answered. "I wondered if you'd call," he said. "I wondered too." "Where are you?" "The parking lot." A pause. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up, leaned back in my seat, and waited. The city spread below me like a promise I was finally ready to keep. When he appeared, walking from the same shadows as before, I felt that familiar jolt of recognition. Not of him, but of myself. The woman who could want things without apologizing for them. "So," he said, sliding into the passenger seat. "What happens now?" I started the engine, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove toward the unknown. "Now we find out," I said. The motel room was nothing like the car. Fluorescent lighting instead of neon, thin walls instead of open sky. But his hands felt the same, and when he kissed me, I still tasted possibility. Afterward, we lay on sheets that smelled like industrial detergent and other people's secrets. I traced patterns on his chest, memorizing the geography of this new territory I'd claimed. "What's your name?" I asked again. "Marcus." He caught my hand, pressed it flat against his heartbeat. "Does knowing change anything?" "Everything," I admitted. "And nothing," he laughed, the sound rumbling under my palm. "That's the most honest thing anyone said to me in months." "What do you do when you're not—" I gestured at the space between us. "I teach high school English, debate team coach." He shifted, propped himself on one elbow. "You?" "Marketing, corporate events, very boring." "Boring people don't do this." I thought about that. Maybe I'm not boring. Maybe I just forgot how to be interesting. "And your husband? Does he know you're here?" The question I'd been avoiding settled between us like a third presence in the room. "He knows I might be." Marcus studied my face. "That's either the most trusting marriage I've ever heard of, or the most broken." "Maybe both." We dressed in comfortable silence. At the door, he turned back to me. "Veronica? This doesn't have to be complicated. It can just be what it is." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed him. Everything felt complicated now. The way I moved through space, the way I looked at my reflection, the way I thought about going home to Liam. "Same time next week?" he asked. "I don't know." He smiled, kissed my cheek. "I'll be in the parking lot. Just in case." I drove home through familiar streets that felt like foreign country. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Liam's car wasn't there yet. Inside, I poured a glass of wine, sat at the kitchen table, and tried to inventory what I'd gained and lost in the space of 2 hours. Liam came home at midnight, smelling like overtime and Chinese takeout. I was still at the kitchen table, working on my second glass of wine and a crossword puzzle I couldn't focus on. "How was your evening?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Enlightening." He poured himself wine, sat across from me. "Good enlightening or bad enlightening?" "I don't know yet." We looked at each other across the table, two people learning a new language without a dictionary. The silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable, but loaded with questions neither of us knew how to ask. "I saw him again," I said finally. Liam nodded. "I figured you might." "Are we okay? Are you okay?" The question bounced back to me, and I realized I didn't have a ready answer. Was I okay? I felt more awake than I had in years, but also unmoored, like I'd cut anchor without checking the weather forecast. "I feel alive," I said. "Terrified, but alive." "Then we're okay." He reached across the table, took my hand. His touch felt different now, not less familiar, but more intentional. Like he was choosing to touch me instead of going through the motions. "What are the rules?" I asked. "I don't know. We're making them up as we go." "That scares me." "Good scared or bad scared?" I laughed despite myself. "Both." He squeezed my fingers. "We don't have to figure it all out tonight." "What if this ruins us? What if it saves us?" I looked at our joined hands, his wedding ring catching the kitchen light. What if I fall in love with him? The question hung in the air like a dare. Liam was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. "Then we'll deal with that too," he said finally. "You make it sound simple." It's not simple, but it's not impossible either. I finished my wine, watched him clear away the crossword puzzle I'd abandoned. We moved around each other in the familiar dance of bedtime routines, but everything felt charged with new electricity. In bed, he held me differently. Not possessively, but like he was grateful for the warmth of me beside him. I love you. I love you too." The words meant the same thing they'd always meant, and something entirely different. 6 months later, I stood in the same parking lot where everything had changed. Marcus was there, leaning against the hood of his car, checking his phone. Our Thursday meetings had become routine, but they still carried the electric charge of the first night. "You're late," he said, but he was smiling. "Traffic." He kissed me hello, a gesture that had evolved from tentative to comfortable to something approaching tenderness. We'd developed our own language over the months, inside jokes, shared references, the particular intimacy of people who'd chosen to know each other in fragments. "Hotel or car tonight?" he asked. "Car. I like the view." We drove to our usual spot, the far edge where the city spread below us. The radio played softly, not the same station as that first night, but something equally atmospheric. I'd learned that Marcus preferred jazz to classical, that he sang along under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. "Veronica," he said as we settled into the familiar configuration of limbs and breath and skin. "I need to tell you something." I pulled back, studied his face. "What?" "I'm moving. Job offer in Portland, teaching position at a private school." The words hit me like cold water. "When?" "End of the month." I sat back in my seat, tried to process what this meant. 6 months of Thursdays, of learning to want without shame, of discovering parts of myself I'd thought were lost forever. And now it was ending. "Say something," he said. "I don't know what to say." "Are you upset?" I considered this. Was I upset? Sad, certainly, but also something else, something that felt almost like relief. "No," I said finally. "I think I'm grateful." He laughed, surprised. "Grateful?" "You gave me back to myself. Both of you did." I touched his face, memorized the shape of his jaw. But I think I was always supposed to find my way home. He nodded, understanding passing between us without explanation. Your husband is a lucky man. I'm a lucky woman. We made love one last time in the car under the open sky, the music wrapping around us like a benediction. When it was over, we sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights blur and sharpen in the distance. Will you tell him about Portland? Marcus asked. Yes, we don't keep secrets anymore. And will you miss this? I thought about it. The parking lot, the electric thrill of stolen hours, the version of myself that existed only in the space between his hands. I'll miss feeling dangerous, I said, but I won't miss feeling divided. He walked me to my car, kissed me goodbye like he meant it. I drove home through streets that had become familiar again, parking in a driveway that looked like home instead of a prison. Liam was waiting in the kitchen, 2 glasses of wine already poured. How was your evening? He asked, the same question he'd asked every Thursday for 6 months. Final, I said. He nodded, handed me a glass. And how do you feel about that? I thought about time stopping, about the difference between being alive and being awake, about the courage it takes to choose love over safety. Ready, I said. We clinked glasses, and the music of it sounded like beginning.